Today we are exploring the Carolingian period. This time period began during the reign of Charlemagne and followed into the late 9th century. This time period began by Charlemagne building up the Frankish kingdom he inherited from his father and grandfather.
Charlemagne defeated the Lombards and laid claim to reviving the glory of the Roman Empire. He then dedicated his name to this time period. Charlemagne was the first Holy Roman Empire.
Christianity was a key element in this time period and its artworks. This can be seen in many art pieces referring to the Bible, churches, and Christ. Here are the key ideas, and we will be touching on those later on in this presentation.
Here's the vocab for this presentation in the Carolingian period. Charlemagne is the main ruler throughout this time period and should be well understood.
Lots of the vocab from this period refer to the techniques they used throughout their art, which we will also be talking about more in depth later on.
We are going to start off the Carolingian period with the bronze statue of the Frankish king, also known as Charlemagne. Most people believe that the writer is Charlemagne the king, but there are a couple conspiracy theories that this could be Charlemagne's grandson, Charles the Bald. This art piece can be observed in motion. You can notice this from the horse's front left leg lifted and its back right leg more at an angle than its back left leg. You can also note that the rider's feet are more of a forward motion instead of just right down the side of the horse. In the rider's left hand, he can be seen holding a sphere or an orb of some kind. This was mostly known to be a globe that represented world dominion. While his right hand is bare, it is in a fist-like, as if it were to be holding something, and it is actually supposed to be holding something. It is either supposed to be a staff or a sword, but unfortunately that has been lost over time, but it is known to have been there at some point. The king is seen to be dressed in an imperial robe and wears a crown representing royalty. The rider on the horse is seen many times throughout ancient Rome and is also known to symbolize the importance of honoring the emperor.
Charlemagne, who was an avid supporter of literature, commissioned many books, the most famous of these being the Gospel Book of Charlemagne. In this book, there are 4 pages containing artwork that depict the 4 Gospel authors as they write. Here we are going to be focusing on the painting of St. Matthew, which you can see in this slide. This painting was created with ink and tempera paint on vellum, which is paper made from animal skin. The creator of this painting used many techniques that were parallel to the classical era, as well as the Greco-Roman period, due to Charlemagne's want of Aachen, a city in Germany over which he ruled, to become a renewed Christian Roman Empire. Not only can you see this in the fact that the painting techniques were very similar to those of that period, but also the fact that the chair, lectern, and St. Matthew's toga are all objects that Romans used. This painting used techniques that were drastically different from the painting of the same person, St. Matthew, from the Hiberno-Saxon period, which used more geometric designs. Here you can see the use of lighting and color to create a more dramatic, three-dimensional piece with lots of perspective and naturalism. It's very evident in St. Matthew's toga, as you can see all of the different lines and lighting they use to create a more realistic feel to it. You can see St. Matthew writing his book, which is a depiction of him as he writes the Gospel book.
Similar to the Coronation Gospels, the Ebbo Gospels also include a painting of St. Matthew. The Ebbo Gospels were made for the Archbishop of Reims, Ebbo. At the time, Reims was one of the major sites for manuscript production. The Ebbo Gospels were written in gold ink on purple dyed vellum. The St. Matthew shown in the Coronation Gospels seems more calm and stable, while the St. Matthew in the Ebbo Gospels seems frantic and distressed. In the Ebbo Gospels painting, St. Matthew is seen hunched over frantically writing as the folds of his drapery twists and vibrate. The painter has merged classical illusionism with Northern European tradition. The artist used highlighting and shadows to create three-dimensional forms, and they achieved the effect of movement with textured rather than smooth modeling. The brushwork lacks equilibrium, and instead they are more expressionistic, energetic, and frenzied. St. Matthew is seated on a stool and seems to be in anguish over his writing. His eyebrows are furrowed, and a winged man is seen in the upper right-hand corner of the image. and appears to be directing St. Matthew's in his writing. The Lindau Gospels rank as one of the greatest masterpieces from the collection of the Morgan Library and Museum. They were named after the Abbey of Lindau on Lake Constance, where it used to reside. The manuscript's covers were actually from different regions and moments in time. The front cover dates to about 100 years later from when the back cover was made. The back cover is the earliest component of the book and was most likely made in the region around Salzburg. The front cover, however, is believed to have been produced in eastern France. On the front cover, a youthful Christ is nailed to the cross as a central motif. There's many pearls and jewels surrounding the Christ, and there are small figures of the Virgin Mary and John the Evangelist. Each small figure is in a space below the arms of the youthful Christ. Similarly, each space above the arms contains 2 angels each. And occupying the cross's shaft are the personifications of the sun and the moon, Sol and Luna. This is a very common feature in the crucifixion scenes of this period. And now we will be talking about the architecture of this period.
Moving on from these art pieces that reference the gospel, we are now moving into another Christian art piece, which is the Palatine Chapel. It is one of the most well-known and best-preserved buildings from the Carolingian period. This chapel was constructed with multicolored marble. The word Palatine comes from the Roman word Palatine, which was used to reference chamberlains of the emperor. Although it is unclear the exact dates this chapel was built, we do know that the chapel was dedicated to Christ and the Virgin Mary 5 years after Charlemagne was promoted from king to holy emperor. This chapel took about 8 years to build, and the Palatine Chapel had an octagonal plan that referenced the Church of Holy Sepulchre and San Vitale. The 8 sides were symbolic of regeneration that referenced Christ's resurrection 8 days after Palm Sunday. If you take a look at the right side image, at the bottom you can observe the ambulatories. These are basically just passageways in a door frame just to be able to walk through and observe the whole dome. During the construction of this chapel, Charlemagne strategically made choices in this building that were linked to Emperor Constantine, who was the first Christian emperor of Rome. Charlemagne brought in many columns and spolias. These columns were to symbolize ancient Rome. This chapel was heavily influenced by Rome. The Palatine Chapel ended up being Charlemagne's final resting place. It only made it right to keep his remains in this church to this day. Charlemagne put a lot of effort and time and work and specific detail into this beautiful chapel, and it was only right to keep him in the place that he spent the most time and had the most meaning to. This church is still very historic and has so much meaning to the Carolingian period as well as ancient Rome.
Another important church constructed during this time period was the Abbey Church at Corbie, also known as the Princely Abbey of Corbie, which is located in Höxter, Germany. An abbey, one of the vocabulary words for this chapter, is a church where monks or nuns typically gather to worship. The architecture in this church, or abbey, uses a technique referred to as westwork, another vocabulary word, which is essentially when 2 towers are constructed on the west or front end of the building to create an impressionable entryway. You can see that in this picture here, where the 2 towers are the westwork. In fact, the Abbey Church is the oldest example of architecture that uses this technique that's still intact today. One of the main features of this church, besides the westwork used on the outside of the building, is the area on the 2nd floor of the chapel. This area served as reserved seats for the emperor and his entourage, where they could sit during service and watch everything down below. Lots of churches had this similar structure to it, but they weren't necessarily used for the same things. This abbey was special in where the emperor had a special place that was reserved for him. Many new additions were added to the upper parts of this church during the 12th century, which can be distinguished from the original parts due to the techniques and masonry work that they used in it. This church, along with it being the oldest architecture that uses westwork, is also the oldest medieval structure in Westphalia. And here we have our works cited page, which includes all the sources that we used information from to create this presentation.